is our 11th Focus on Lakeville, and they just keep getting bigger and bigger, and I'm so happy to see so many people here. So many of you know Nancy Yeatts, and what would we do without Nancy? What would the Lakeville do? So Nancy's going to talk to us today about the Assawampset Pond Complex. So take it away.
Okay, hi. Some very familiar faces and some new faces, so that's really nice. Before I start, I just want to tell you, anybody has any questions anywhere, please feel welcome to interrupt me, because I find if I'm listening to somebody talk and I have a question and I wait till the end of the program, I forgot what that question was. So don't hesitate if you have a question. I am the environmental manager of the Assawampset Pond Complex, and I've worn many, many hats in Lakeville, if you know me. But the one hat that I've worn since 2002 is the manager of the Assawampset Pond Complex. And that's one consistent, besides Eagle Lady, I'll always claim that. And that's basically how I got involved with all of this. So I tell you just a little bit about myself and how I got here. I moved to Lakeville in 1975. Actually, it was Freetown. I moved to Freetown in 1975. I did not move to Lakeville until 1976. And in 75, my friend Debbie Frew, her father was town administrator in Freetown. And she took me on my very first ride between the lakes and around the lakes. And I have to say that being a Navy brat, I really this was my first time being left behind, and my family had moved on because my father got transferred to Jacksonville, so I stayed behind with my friend Debbie and her family. And when she took me on that ride, we came back to the house. In the old days, the pumping station on Little Quiticus had a greenhouse that was active, and they grew flowers in there, and they planted them all around the property. And in those days, you could drive right through. There weren't any gates. So we came back to the house, and her father goes, "Where'd you go?" And I'm like, "We went to the flower house." And I have never forgot. I still call it to this day the flower house. And that was when I decided, wow, I'm not in the Navy with my father anymore. We're not traveling all over the country. This is where I'm going to live. And I've been here ever since. We bought our first house in Lakeville in 1976 on the other side of town. And in 1988, my husband and I bought a house on Assawampset Pond. So, as you can probably tell, being on Assawampset Pond, back when in 1999, 98, 99, because the deal of acquiring Betty's Neck and protecting the property around the lakes was threatened back in the late 90s. The cranberry business, a lot of cranberry growers were pretty successful, and they made quite a bit of money. And so as it became more and more people in different countries were even growing cranberries, and the price got a little lower, some of the cranberry growers who had upland that they just always had probably could no longer afford to keep that upland. So when the upland of Betty's Neck, because the cranberry bogs are in the front where Island Terrace used to be, and it was owned by the Deacus family. And when they decided they were going to sell the upland part and just keep the bogs, they brought in a developer from New Jersey. And he had these crazy ideas of, okay, we can put 1,000 units of condos here. And we can have a water tower, and we can have a big septic treatment plant. And I was still pretty new. I was only on the Conservation Commission back then. Actually, a lot of people think that I'm the one that did the Betty's Neck deal, and I did a lot, but I was on the Conservation Commission back then, and we had Rich the camera, Shauna Hurd, who always goes, "You get all the credit for it." Rich the camera, Shauna Hurd, and Jerry White were the selectmen at the time. And I did work with them. I think I was a pain in there, you know what, because I was always there, and I when the money started or the grant started to be written to try to save the property, I'm the one who did the tours up on Betty's Neck. I'm the one who got the coffee. I made sure everybody talked to everybody else. And at that time, we didn't have a town planner or anybody that was capable of writing the huge grant, because acquiring Betty's Neck was $9 million is what that cost overall. So you needed partners, and you needed somebody to put together and write the grant. And grants are it's very difficult to write the grants back then. So we had contacted the Trust for Public Land, and they had some money from a benefactor who we never knew. It could be anywhere in the country because their main station is out in Washington State. And but they have offices in Boston, and they came in and they helped us write the grant to get the money. But we could only get so much money for the state, because this is back in 2002, and it was at the end of an administration that wanted to have a greenway and was interested in investing in getting pieces of land, especially connecting pieces of land. Like their greenway they originally wanted to get was like from Fall River to the Freetown State Forest, like through Lakeville and like out onto the Cape, so they had wildlife corridors for the wildlife to be able to travel in those paths and not just be trapped in between housing developments and little isolated pieces of land. So the Trust for Land came in, and we had many meetings. It was over, I would say, almost a 2-year period, whether we were going to be successful, whether we were going to get the money, whether we weren't going to get the money, if the partners were going to work together. And you have New Bedford, who owns the water rights. You have Taunton, who owns the water rights. You have Lakeville. You have Freetown, you have Middleborough, all parties that own property around the lakes. And especially Lakeville, because Betty's Neck was in Lakeville, was very interested in acquiring that property. 328 acres is the total of what the Betty's Neck property is. And the bogs in the front are 197. I asked Joe, we go back and forth, because Joe Chamberlain, who's on the commission with me, his family owned that land and he grew up there. So we did really well with the Deacon's family, because John Deacon's grew up there too. And he was interested in having it saved and not having 1,000 units of condos. But coming up with $9 million was going to be difficult. So as we worked with it, New Bedford came up with $600,000. Lakeville came up with $1.2 million, and I will never in my life at that town meeting, I was a nervous wreck at that town meeting, but the vote at that town meeting to purchase that land was 303, I think, to 3. Only 3 people voted against it, and they were the same people that voted against everything that night, so it wasn't really like they didn't want it. They were people that we have that just voted against everything. So it was almost unanimous, and then we had to go and vote on it at the polls. It was a two deal where you vote at town meeting and then you have to go vote at the polls, and it passed by a landslide at the polls also, and that's how we acquired Betty's Neck. But now, leading up to that point, when you get the money from the state back to the grant, I jump around a little bit because I haven't talked about this. This is 2002, so I'm thinking about the process, so I might jump around a little bit. But we had to write the grant, and we had to say why this land, why are you going to get this money? Because 1.2 came from Lakeville, 600,000 came from Taunton, and 600,000 came from New Bedford. But the rest came from the state of Massachusetts. Now, a lot of this land around the ponds had been closed for years, so you get arrested if you go there. But once public money goes into that land, and I've taken a lot of grief over the years that hunting is allowed on the APC. But I would say at least $2.5 million came straight out of Fisheries and Wildlife's pocket. So they were there during the whole thing to make sure that would happen. We do have in Lakeville, we did fight at Betty's Neck, because Betty's Neck is like the heart of the APC, and the Peach Barn up at Betty's Neck is the visitor center, and the dream of that was environmental education, and still is. And because a lot of families and programs go there, at Betty's Neck you have to have a special permit for hunting with a shotgun. The rest of the APC, you just need a permit from the state, a regular hunting license. But at Betty's Neck, you need a permit from me for $10. We just put $10 on it. I don't even know why. Because I would always say to people, why don't you just hunt the rest of it? Because why give me the $10 when you got 3,500 acres out there that you can hunt? You don't need to pay me the $10, and then you don't have to listen to my whole speech of where you can go and where you can't go and what you have to do. So I've always kind of made it difficult. And over the years, I also made it a lottery. Because in the first few years, I had a lot of people that just thought all the deer must be hiding at Betty's Neck and wanted to get up there and hunt. So we did a lottery, and it would only be 10 people in the lottery. And then one year I had like 30 people, so I said, well, we'll break it up into 2 weeks. But as the years have gone by, I would say I haven't given out a permit probably in the last 5 years. Because people finally got the thing without having to go through me and all the pain of everything and pay the $10, that there's plenty of other places on the APC where they can hunt. And I always do tell people, you know, this could have been 1,000 units of condos, or actually by right. Condos would have had to go for a zoning change, so that probably would have had to go by town meeting. Whether it would pass or not, I don't know back then. But by right, they still could have done 148 house lots out there. And there is, Betty's Neck, as, I don't know if you know or not, but if you look at the map, Betty's Neck is a peninsula that sticks out into the drinking water. That's Taunton and New Bedford's drinking water. That's drinking water for 250,000 people. And it's 2.2 miles of shoreline around Betty's Neck. And that would have been a lot of impact on that land and on the drinking water, which is some of the things that Trust for Public Land took and put into the grant. Also, there are hay fields. We call the peach barn because it used to be a peach orchard, and then peach trees only lived so many years, so I guess after so many years when they died, it became like alfalfa fields, and there's 44 acres of fields. And that was another part. When you write in the grant, you have to tell all these reasons why you want to save this land. So the hayfields in southeastern Massachusetts, aging hayfields were becoming increasingly rare because they were all turning into housing. So the bobolinks, which are a little bit rare around here, nest in the aged hayfields. So that was another little piece that we put in of a reason to save it. How about 10,000 years of Native Americans living on that land that had never been touched, really? I mean, there were 2 houses. Actually, I brought a little cheat sheet because Ken Leonard, who's my history person to go to, everybody asks me all the time why it's called Betty's Neck. So, the last descendants of Chief Massasoit lived on Betty's Neck. And what had happened is John Sassamon was a Native American, but he was also a spy for the English back in the day. So he persuaded Pispaquin, who was the local sachem, to give the ceremonial land at Assawampset Pond away. And the land in those days, Native American land, was held by the women. So let's see, it was given, so the land was held by the tribal women and given to John Sassamon's daughter, Assawito, known to the English as Betty. So that's how Betty got her name. And the last descendants of Chief Massasoit lived on Betty's Neck up until I think the 50s, maybe, Joe?
Yep.
And I can't say their name. I can say Tiwalima really easy. There were 2 sisters that lived there, and it was Charlotte and Melinda. But I can say Tiwalima because we see that one all the time. But with Taco Wasaki, I'm not good at that one. So, anybody? Did somebody say they knew how to say it?
Lieutenant Canoes.
Of course, Jerry. Thank you. And their houses and land is long gone. That was it for Betty's Neck. So that was another piece for the grant between the bobolinks and the aging hayfields and the Indian. It was finally, we got the grant. and we got the money, like, whatever was left after Lakeville, New Bedford, and Taunton all pitched in and Fisheries and Wildlife, the rest we got from the state of Massachusetts. And it was the end of that era. In fact, we passed papers on June 28th, 2002. And I know for a fact because I drove the papers myself to Plymouth to register them in the county deeds because it was the last day of business in the fiscal year. And it changed after that. The whole thought of the greenways and all that with the new administration kind of faded. So it's been harder. And the money kind of dried up to buy pieces of land. There's still money available. Actually, I hear that this year there's quite a bit of land from Fisheries and Wildlife to purchase some additional land. But a lot of the land trusts, there is a conservation restriction on Betty's Neck. That was part of the deal. We also had to write a management plan for Betty's Neck. When the state gives you money, they just don't say, here's your money, go have a good time. We had to write a management plan to go along with how it was going to be managed. And I sat in on a lot of those to fight. A lot of times when there's a conservation restriction, there are things that you can't do. But I wanted to make sure, seeing as the Peach Barn on Betty's Neck is a wonderful facility, but there's no electricity and there's no water, and it's just a big beautiful barn. Actually, last year, I think it was last year, yeah, we were only a little ways into this year. Last year we finally voted at town meeting to get the money and we put a new roof on it because it was leaking. But the barn otherwise from the leak of the roof is in very good shape. And it's been the plan all along, which was also written into the grant, that this would be the educational center for the whole APC, and that we would teach people about the quality of drinking water. I think back to when I was in college, why is the water quality so important to me, and it's been my goal since I've ever been in Lakeville, is how important is the water. When I was in college in 1969, I took an investment class in my freshman year, and the advice was invest in water. I'm like, why on earth would I invest in water with my money, my good money, when I can just go turn on the faucet? I've thought of that many, many, many times over the years, especially when I go, if you're going to fill up with gas and you're, I didn't even bring in my water bottle, my LL Bean tin water bottle was empty, and you go and open the thing and a bottle of water at the gas station is $1.99. I'm thinking, I could have been a very wealthy lady. Anyway, so water quality to me is very important, and I did bring some other information in the back. I brought maps for Betty's Neck. I have had questions about the walks when people say, oh, I live in Lakeville, I don't know where to go for a walk. I'm like, there's 3,500 acres of the Assawamsett Pond Complex, and what is it? It's trails all through and around. There are some off-limit areas, which are the islands, because right now we have a nesting pair of bald eagles on Anoxanon, which is the small island on Great Quiticus, and they are sitting on eggs. So the second nest, I don't know. The second nest is getting very old. The second nest is on Parkshire Pond. The APC is made up of Assawamsett, Parkshire, Great Quiticus, and Little Quiticus. Those are the ponds. Long Pond is not part of it. Long Pond is, the City of Fall River does have the drinking water rights to Long Pond. Not a lot of people know that, but they do. But they have the Watuppas, so they've never, decided that they want water. And besides, by now Long Pond has so many houses and is having problems with water quality, with the invasive weeds. But those things, that seems funny this year. I've been doing this for 20 years, and there's been a lot of dreams about, how we're going to get the weeds out of Long Pond and make sure they don't get into some of the other ponds and this and that. And it seems in the last few years, all of a sudden there's been money available. Finally, after 20 years, which is probably why I haven't retired yet, because now there's money and stuff I've been working on for 20 years, and the money's there now. There's a lot of new people that's like, hey, I've been working on this for 20 years. I want to have some say in how that money is spent. And finally, this year, a weed harvester went into Long Pond and harvested the weeds. The hardest part was getting permit for the endangered species, which are mussels and the red-bellied cooter, which is a turtle. Finally, from Natural Heritage, we got the permission with a 2-week window only. And the money came through our state senator and representatives' offices to hire the people to come down from New Hampshire, and they did a pilot project with the weeds. Now, the permit, which was so hard to get, is good for 5 years. And it's even going to extend the window a little bit about what it can be done. And actually, I've worked with Long Pond Association many times over the last 20 years. And they have a really good organization right now. And they just got their 501c3, which is nonprofit status. So they'll be able to raise money, and they're hoping to get their own harvesters so that they can do a program, because there's a lot of other things that need to be done.
When you say harvester, do you mean an actual piece of equipment that, well, don't those weeds though get worse when they break off?
They do. But the weed,
Right.
right, but the new weed harvesters, they go through, pull them out by the roots, and then make several other passes just with like a strainer to strain up the other pieces. So the newer equipment is better than what it was. And so hopefully next year we'll have a larger window where they can do it more. They can only, in 5 days, by the time the company in New Hampshire was just so wonderful, I can't remember what their name was, but they were wonderful about holding that space for us, because there's a weed problem all over Massachusetts, and so they have a lot, but they held that window for us and came in and did it. And next year maybe they can do another piece. And because they're a nonprofit, and because there's a lot more people involved right now, because they finally saw something done, like people were getting like apathetic because, oh, nothing ever happens, but now they actually saw it being done. People are doing great things like there's information on the back table about some workshops about water quality, about antiseptic system pumps. There's like 400 or something houses around there, and people need to take care of their septic systems. They need not to put toxic fertilizers on their lawns, because Long Ponds you can't be if you're trying to get rid of them and you get the weed harvester, you can't be feeding them also. So there's a lot of good stuff that's happening now. So I guess I can't retire for a while. Oh, Joe first.
And we just found out how much the guy that runs the harvester gets paid. Remember?
Oh, well, not the guy that runs the harvester. The company's
The company.
reasonable.
Yeah.
That's because of Natural Heritage. Sometimes the expense is extraordinary,
Yeah.
because one of the rules that Natural Heritage gave us is a man has to sit on the harvester with the company in case a turtle comes out, that he can take it and put it back. And what was it?
1,800.
1,800 a day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair job.
Well, there aren't that many people that qualify in that. It's just like, to climb the tree and ban the eagles, you have to have a permit, national permit almost, to be able to do that. So luckily those people work for Fisheries and Wildlife, so we don't have to pay them to ban the eagles, but it's not a cheap thing, and people are now taking notice, and now that Long Pond Association, after all these years, has a nonprofit status. That's a huge thing, because they do like I guess a poker run. I never was on a motorcycle poker run, but they do it with the boats around, and then you can join the association. I've been joining for the last 3 years since. It doesn't matter if you live on Long Pond or not. It's Lakeville. What's $25 to join to help out trying to keep the pond clean? Oh, sorry, what one's that?
I was just curious, how big is this harvester, and where did they put it in? Where did they start?
One of the residents agreed to let it go in on their property. They also went in on the Freetown Town Beach, on the Freetown side, because if a third or a quarter of Long Pond is in Freetown and the rest is in Lakeville. So that first, when they did the Freetown side down in Brownsville Cove, they put in at the Freetown Town Beach, and then there were people that volunteered their land because they have to dump off the weeds. And then I believe one of the farmers I'm not sure exactly, I don't know if it was Freitas or not,
Yeah,
but one of the
Freitas.
farmers allowed all those weeds to have be dumped on their property because, say they have weeds the size of this room. In a month or 6 weeks, it's down to the size of this little corner because it's just all water and it all dries down. And I think they can use it even things on their fields,
They
maybe
can mulch
for
it and so
mulch
forth, yeah.
it or anything like that. So everybody, it was like seeing the community come together. It was a really, really good thing.
Does the state contribute anything,
That was state money that came through to hire that harvester.
but just that amount, they don't,
It was $250,000 came through,
because
2
the
years in a
state-
row.
The state opened up the pond. That was a big mistake. So we have all these boats coming in, and they bring the weeds.
Right. And that was another thing that was discussed in the money that's coming down is like a boat washing station. And I think
Yeah.
Freetown, the boat ramp's on the Freetown side, so it's not really on us, but their gate is gonna go up and they do have a monitor and that some of the funding might go for the monitor from the state to monitor to make sure if those boats go into the pond. I don't think it's very hard to take back like a right that's given, that boat ramp's there. I can't even imagine, and it goes out with information from Fisheries and Wildlife that you can put in, and I think it might take an act of the legislature to close that down. So that would be something that you'd have to talk to your state rep about, and he's the one that's been getting us the money. So Senator Roderick's got us the $250,000 2 years in a row to do some of these programs. We also, Lakeville, through the APC management team, because out of the management plan came a management team. I'm Lakeville's representative. We have a representative from Middleborough. We have a representative from Fisheries and Wildlife. Serped people come to a lot of our meetings to help out, to make sure we're following the management plan. So a lot of those rules and stuff in the management plan have to be followed. And as far as the boat ramp goes,
So even if they wash the boats down, where is that going? They'd have to have a catchment just so it
right,
doesn't
they
go
would
back
have to
in
have
the
a
water.
basin. And the state used to do that in other ponds. They'd have a boat washing station, but then you'd have to, I don't even know how much that would cost, because then you'd have to have a place where that would go. So it would have to be some kind of a basin. So, like I say, we've been lucky to get the money to get the harvester. And did I answer your question about the size? I mean, there's a video on Lake Camp that shows them using the harvester in the river, because the Nemasket River is clogged up too, and they've had the harvester in the Nemasket River, and I believe there's a video on Lake Camp that you can look at and see the size and how it works. So, and in the back with Serped, I think I kind of got off the subject here, there's some workshops. We did a grant. We did a MVP grant, and they asked because we've continually had management team meetings quarterly since 2002, because that's in the management plan. We have to meet quarterly. We just met last week. I should say Friday. No, we met the day before yesterday. We meet in March, June, September, and December. And because it was the same group of people that are represented, New Bedford, Taunton, Fisheries and Wildlife, Middleborough, Lakeville, the other thing about the grant being regional, it's easier to get money if you do a grant that's regional. So through the APC, we did a regional MVP grant, which was 10 years coming too, because MVP stands for Municipal Vulnerability. And SERPAD, Southeast Regional Planning District, has helped all the towns around here write their emergency plans. So, and everybody's plan was about the flooding from 2010. So it was like, that was 10 years coming. When I think back sometime, people go, oh, it doesn't happen. No, it doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes it takes a really long time. So SERPAD helped all these towns write their plan and wrote into each of the plan about the flooding being a problem, and about the Assawamsett Pond Complex needs a management plan, how it's managed. The water didn't get out of the dam. The water didn't get out of Long Pond and flooded the people because it didn't get out. When we have a rain event, it literally takes 10 days for the water to level out of Long Pond into Assawampset, because there's a clog over by Tamarack Park where the pipe going under the road, when they replaced Route 18, the culvert that went in was undersized, so the water gets stuck. So there needs to be a management plan. So we wrote a municipal vulnerability plan, and we got $250,000, I think. A lot of the grants need a stipend too. Back to the Betty's Neck one, the stipend that we needed to help pitch in came from the Trust for Public Land. On this last one, the Nature Conservancy gave Lakeville $25,000 as that piece to get the other piece, because they don't want to just give you money, they want to show that you're helping yourself also on a lot of the grants. So that piece came from the Nature Conservancy, gave us $25,000. It was a 2-year grant, and it came through the APC, and a lot of the stuff that came out of it were one of the priorities was to fix that culvert by the Tamarack, fix the dam at the head of the Nemasket River, because it's 100 years old, and it relies on people going out there on a 2x4 to pull out the boards when it's time to let water out. Should be automated. I mean, it needs help. So a lot of these things came out of the grant of what needs to be done. And another thing that came out was, now that the weeds are coming out of Long Pond, the workshops in the back that I brought the information for. I don't have dates yet, but I put a sign-up sheet if you're interested about, like I said, like about lawn maintenance, buffer strips. I mean, there are things that people that live on the water can do, to not put chemical fertilizer on their lawn, or, pump their septic system out every couple of years, or they can also put a buffer strip. So if there is some kind of fertilizer or something that gets on the lawn, that it hits the buffer strip before it actually hits the water. So those workshops are going to be put on through SERPED. And there's some information in the back about the lawn ones, even if you don't live on the water. Do we really need, a lot of people in Lakeville don't have, we're not drinking Taunton and Bedford water. We do have some water that is treated by Taunton that comes to Lakeville that we're entitled to, but we rely on groundwater for our wells. So we wanted to put the chemicals on you, so it really applies to everyone, what you're doing with your lawn and your septic system, because you have to drink that water that's coming out of the ground. So anyway, there are 2 workshops they have, and they don't have the dates for them yet. There are actually going to be 4 workshops. One's on lawn maintenance, one's on septic upkeep, and I think they're going to be on Lake Cam too, so you'll be able to go. You don't have to go. A lot of times people are really, especially if an old septic system, they don't want to go sit there and listen about what they're supposed to do. So they're going to do some Zoom, and then they're going to be about what you can plant and what actually going to do a pilot project. Somebody's volunteered on Long Pond to do a buffer on their yard to show other people how it's done. Another thing we're doing, we have a new town planner in Lakeville, and he's writing a grant for Betty's Neck to get water and electricity up there so we can start doing some more environmental programs up there. I used to. I always thought that it would be a perfect place for Nature's Classroom. Back in the day when we first got it, and there was a lot more program, I had a lot more time, I guess, and a lot more programs going on, probably a lot more energy too. But when Nature's Classroom came to like the elementary school and the kids all went, there was always a group of kids that got left behind. And when I was wearing my hat as a selectman, it was really easy for me to get a school bus to get the kids that didn't go to Nature's Classroom up to Betty's Neck, and we did a lot of programming up there. We did scavenger hunts and teaching. We had a company come down from Vermont, Keeping Track it was called, and had the kids out on the property to see otter track and things like that. So those are the things we'd like to get back to. So our new town planner in Lakeville is writing another grant to try to help us get electricity and bathrooms would be good, because every time I have an event at Betty's Neck, I gotta rent a porta john, and that gets really a little more costly every year. So probably have 2 events. So this year we're gonna do something on Earth Day, because now I'm starting to think in advance, and if we do get money to fix up the building and it's gonna be beautiful and it's gonna have a bathroom and everything's gonna be nice, then everybody's gonna be wanting to use it. And I have to stick to my original thing that's written into the management plan. It's for environmental education. And not that you can't do other things there, but I figured if we do something up there on Earth Day, I just need to I'm feeling right now I need to reinforce that environmental part of it for Earth Day. And hopefully we have a little budget that's going to get passed so that we can have the restroom and some programs to come in. And one of them is, and this is from Tracy Craig, I don't know if you all know Tracy, but Tracy is crazy about having programs up at Betty's Neck. And she either pushes me through it and helps me with it, both. But she's got the idea that on Earth Day, and I guess Arbor Day too, and she got the list of we're going to purchase some little trees so that we can give away trees for people to plant. And I'm thinking as we're doing the workshop on buffer zones, there are things like red bud and some shrubbery also that you could use. So we'll do some trees and some shrubbery and do some different things. So it's going to be the weekend of Earth Day, which is April 22nd. So you can look for something in the paper, because we'll have other things going on up there also for children. I try to keep it towards children. We really need somebody to follow up after us with the environmental stuff. So I always have focused on children. Jerry?
Nancy, do you know that the Lakeville Garden Club puts on an Arbor Day lesson for all the second graders, and we give them...
That was Tracy's idea. I think I'm supposed to be contacting you to see if you will help us with, you know, not just give people a tree, but give them some help with what to do with it.
Right.
So,
Yeah, a lot of dads run them out with the lawnmowers by the next year.
oh, so maybe we need to provide some little fencing
Fencing or something.
to go around. Well, we're gonna have a little budget, so we will, we'll see what we can do to stretch it out.
Do you have guaranteed access to the bogs there and with that new condos and everything?
Okay, that's pretty tricky. When we wrote the management plan, our access to Betty's Neck, we have a right of way. Town of Lakeville has a right of way. And it comes in, and so do the condos have a right of way. That's belonged to the Deacons property, which has now been sold to a Canadian company that now owns the bogs. They've been sold to a Canadian company, but the conservation restriction went with it. So it will remain bogs, but it comes in by I still will, for my lifetime, call it Island Terrace. So it comes in by there, and it goes in and around the buildings. In the first 6 months that we owned Betty's Neck, and we had done a couple of events, well, I had to do a big event up there before town meeting. Did a lot of hay rides. Actually, this was my cheat sheet from the hay ride to show people the property that they needed to go vote for. So it goes in by the barns. In the first 6 months that we owned it and did an event up there, as somebody hit a bog worker with their car and kept going. So part of the plan was for them to build us a road across the bog. That road wasn't there. Well, you go straight up to Betty's Neck, that road wasn't there. Our right of way was going around the bogs and back up the back road. So that was in the original plan to do that, but they did it a lot quicker once that had happened. And so that road that went up, but that's not what's registered in Plymouth. So that new road that goes across the bog, there's some legality of if that's actually included in our right of way, even though it was spelled out that it was going to be built for us to have clear access up. So that's another thing that's going to hopefully be written into the grant, is some legal help to figure out, to get that our legal right of way, so then the town can fix it. Or if we take turns, right now, the bog fixes it sometimes, it hasn't been fixed after over the winter. Actually, we used to get gravel and fill it in, we used to get gravel donated and fill it in periodically. But it does not, like I said, we don't have any contact with this Canadian company that owns it now. So there's some legality things that need to be done too to do improvements. I do realize that. One of my rangers just called me yesterday and said he broke the spring on his truck, so we need to do some improvements to the road. We can't do tar. That had been brought up, oh, we're gonna tar it. No, absolutely not. Environmentally, we have to be the example. You can't just tar that because the runoff of gas and oil into the bogs and whatever would be no good. We're the example, so we have to do it right. But, so, it's never easy. But I'm thinking it's pretty hopeful that there's money available and these grants are available to do things like that and use the same reasons when you're writing the grant and really go heavy on the educational for children. I'd love to see a nature's classroom up there. If we had bathrooms and water, we'd be able to have our own kind of nature's classroom. We'd be teaching our own children about how special it is what we have, you know, in Lakeville. Sometimes I think just by you being here that you realize how special it is what we have in Lakeville, but not everybody does. And sometimes people move here from the city and never had a septic system. They had public sewer and they don't get, you can't just be dumping everything down there, so. Anywho. Yes.
Are these trails marked
Yes.
as you're walking?
The trails at Betty's Neck, and there are maps. I'm looking desperately for, hopefully I can get a college student or somebody to help me, because that map on the back of that is antique. I had a student do that map for me a long time ago. It could look much better than that, the one that's on the back of Welcome to Betty's Neck. I would love to have a new map. And now that we're having a little more attention up there and getting the building fixed. I mean, we used to have the visitor center, half of that was an Eagle Scout project. When you look at the Peach Barn, one half of it used to be 2 apartments, one on either side and the main part of the barn in the middle. And there were apartments for the people who worked in the cranberry bogs. So at one time there was electricity and water up there. So back when we first got it, we did the Eagle Scout project, and the Eagle Scouts came in and ripped out. We had I love community projects. Everybody came in from the community. We had a day, and we had masks. Way before COVID, but everybody had a mask, and we had hammers and sledgehammers, and there were teenagers and adults and Boy Scouts, and ripped out. It was an apartment. We stripped it out. The landfill. The dump back in those days had brought a big tractor trailer up there where all those building materials was. We stripped it out, and the Eagle Scout, his name was Chris. I wish I could remember his last name. His name was Chris. He went on to be a project manager. Got what Eagle Scouts have to do is get community help to do the stuff. So we got the Fall River Carpenters Union did all the windows, helped with all the windows. Then he got the material to do the walls, the floors. And we had money. Where'd the money come from? Oh, the money came from when we acquired Betty's Neck. John Degas gave us a little bit of money to go along with it, like about $25,000 to do little things. He also gave me about 200 cranberry crates that say Betty's Neck on the side that I've been selling over the years to raise money. If I have an event, I always put them out. Buy 4, you get 1 free. $25. So I've been doing that to have a little money to do buy stuff for kids. Anyway, so we had a little bit of money, and I purchased a wood stove. So we had the chimneys checked. They were in perfect condition. So there was a wood stove up there. So in the wintertime, I used to have a volunteer. On like Saturday and Sunday, we'd go up and start the wood stove. Carol Tolles from Island Terrace could give me a case of hot chocolate. She was a wonderful person. She would give me, when I had an event, she would bring up trays of cookies. Anyway, she would give me the hot chocolate, and people would be out on the fields and walking and could come into the visitor center, get warm, and have some hot chocolate. So we haven't been able to do that since when we had the leak in the roof, it leaked into the visitor center, and so the ceiling has to be replaced, so it hasn't been opened. But hoping to get back to that again because it was great. And when I bought that original stove, I bought the longest lasting salt stone stove because I always thought we could be open and we get volunteers to keep it open on the weekend. So you just like bank the fire down on Saturday night and come back on Sunday morning and it would still, you wouldn't have to go through all the trouble getting it started again. But we were never able to get enough volunteers to help with that. We did have one guy one winter that did it every Sunday all winter and keep our organic hot chocolate. So you could have your choice of Carol's hot chocolate or the organic hot chocolate. He was a nice guy.
Nancy, if someone wanted to donate time or treasure to this project, how would they do it?
They would call me. They would call me.
Get
All
that
these
number?
years, I've always, whether I have a hat or not, it's always kind of been me up there. So
And your number is?
it's on the map, on the bottom of the map. It's
Highlighted.
yeah, highlighted on the bottom of the map. It has been. Now, sometimes the town will call. Well, somebody called and we don't want to give out your number. It's like they put your number in the paper. Give it out. I answer it all the time. It doesn't take long to. My husband gets mad. I'm on a mountain in Georgia and the phone rings and I'm like, if I answer this phone, I can take care of this in 5 minutes. Rather than when I get back, it's going to take me 2 days to take care of it. So just hold your breath. Anyway,
So I have a question about the hiking trails and public parking for hiking.
yes. At
So,
Betty's Neck or around the complex.
around the complex.
You can
For
park
those, especially for
anywhere.
those who are new to
Right.
the area.
Around the Assawamsa Pond complex, you can park anywhere on a lot of the trails. On that map, if you see the little roads you can see, or anywhere there's a gate. If you drive around the APC, anywhere there's a gate, as long as you don't block the gate, you can park on any of the access roads, like Long Point Road. There's beautiful hikes. Going into White Banks, which is on the far side of Assawamsa Pond, there's the most beautiful cliff walk. And that's another thing I should start to do again. I used to do walks all the time. But there's a trail that if you park on the corner, if you come up Bond Street on the sharp corner, you park by that gate, you walk in, there's a cliff walk that goes like along the top before you get to White Banks. That's just a really beautiful walk.
White Banks in Middleborough, on the
Yes.
Middleborough side?
Yeah.
So if I wanted to walk there, where would I go?
You can park on any of the fire roads. Just look for a gate. If you go down Bond
One of the
Street,
red- I look for a red gate.
yeah, you look for a red. Well, some of them are old and wooden and broken.
Right.
They've been replaced little by little, but
Okay.
I mean, and we've had a lot of. It's hard, and I'm looking for rangers. I'm looking. I had one of my best people just moved to Oregon, so I'm always looking for the. Just another thing I didn't cover is Taunton, Bedford, and Lakeville each chip in $9,000 a year because that was part of the management plan was to have rangers that will watch and see. I mean, I love the fishermen and I love to see people fishing, but I don't love it when they go in the woods and the trees in the way and they decide they're going to chop down the brush off the bank so they can cast. I have no patience with that. In fact, I don't ranger myself too much anymore because after you tell somebody what they can't do for about the 100th time, I'm not real nice about it. Ever have your horse, I'm watching as our horse is peeing in the water, yeah, no, thank you.
So, back to White Bank, somebody, made this, a beautiful place where you can sit. It's like a homemade bench, so you can sit there and overlook the water. It's
On the
really,
On the cliff
on
trail,
that cliff area, yeah, it's really, really pretty.
it is nice.
I can't find it.
Yes?
Back to the weeds.
Oh, back to the weeds.
Have they invaded into the other ponds to the degree that?
That is not like, because especially Assawamsa, only the people that live there can have a boat. And, the thing is, a lot of those people don't take their boats anywhere else.
But isn't the water from Long Pond flows into us?
It does, but it has to go all the way through the Snake River before it gets there, and that does filter some of it out. But that's another problem that will have to be solved when they enlarge the culvert, because you don't want to be letting a whole bunch of dirty water back in. So all that engineering and permits are the hardest part of getting anything done. It took almost a year to get the permit to get the weed harvester in there. So, and also in the Nemasket, But you also have a Fish and Herring Commission, Lakeville Middleborough Fish and Herring Commission, that has a good voice and goes to all the meetings, and they're always speaking up, and they got that harvester in the Nemasket, which is part of the reason that, we weren't reinventing the wheel to get it into Long Pond. We didn't have to jump through, I'm saying we, Serpent did a lot of it. Didn't have to jump through quite as many hoops, but you still have to get around the endangered species. And conservation just looked at the permit for the dam, because it got a bad mark on the dam test where the state comes in, checks the dam, and it needed to be, it's not just the place where the water goes through the structure. The whole earthenware from Middleborough to there is considered the dam, and it had all grown in, so they're like, hey, you gotta clean this up. So they just can't go clean it up, they gotta come to conservation. So Taunton hired a firm to write the permit. We wanna come in here and clean this up, what do we have to do? So on the permit, by mistake, they were going to clean all the brush and stuff, and they were gonna work underwater. And I don't know why they did that, we don't know why they did that, Joe. Joe's on conservation with me. Anyway, so now, the whole thing went to a halt for like a month and a half, and that's where conservation, I also put something out from conservation, because they get a bad name sometime. Oh, they're not gonna let us do it. I can't think, in the last 5 years, if we've ever denied 2 projects that I can think of.
Really?
Dumping the chemicals on the tree, we might have said no to.
Well, I was thinking that's a problem we got coming up, that beech leaf disease. Because people want to spray the hell out of their beech trees. I don't blame them for saving trees, but then all that stuff ends up in the water and feeds the weeds even more.
Right. Anyway, where was I? Anyway, so I put brochures for other stuff out back for conservation and like that also. And that is a problem that we have upcoming, but it's right on there that conservation will work with you, because we really don't deny anything. We just try to steer you in the direction to do your project so it doesn't hurt the wetlands. The wetlands are sponges, and that's part of the flooding too. The more people the permitting for the Nemasket is like, okay, we can't just, the Army Corps of Engineers has to come in and decide, you can't just dredge out the river, because downstream from Middleborough, over the last 100 years, people have probably built their houses where they really probably shouldn't have. Because it's not strict enough of how close you can come to the wetland, or how much you can fill in, or you fill it in and then it doesn't look like wetland anymore. Because you need that wetland when the floods come to, it's like a sponge to absorb that water. So you can't be dredging out the Nemasket and send the river down to flood out the people downstream. All that has to go through permitting and engineering and whatever, so it's all timely. Joe?
And of course, the reality of the situation is, even if you do dredge, as the ocean rises, where do you suppose the water from that pond goes? It goes into the ocean. If the ocean goes up half an inch, there's that many millions of gallons of water that ocean can no longer accept, and it ends up in your cellar.
So wetlands are important.
Oh,
Nobody thinks, and it's just really stuff like how many times we'll go on a property and everybody has taken their leaves and dumped them out back in the wetland, and now that area no longer is going to accept that water because you're filling it in, and they really don't know.
That's now become part of our orders of conditions.
Right.
The guy wants to build a house, do his thing. My question is, where are you going to dump the leaves?
Or the snow.
Well, the snow. That's my big question. Where are you going to plow the snow? Because, and, it always ends up somewhere towards the wetlands or the wet area. And yes, it does a little bit of recharge, but it can also clog everything too.
Well, it can also have gas and oil in it.
Oh, can have. Yep.
So, yeah, and the more they try to have a little piece of land and have as many houses as they can get on it, that's for recharge too, because the water needs to, it's not just the surface water that we worry about, it's the groundwater. Because in Lakeville, most people are using the groundwater, have wells, not on city water.
And I've always worried about the lawn care people that come and spray stuff on your lawn and put up the stickers that say keep your pets and your children off the lawn.
That can't be good.
Where's that water, when it rains, where's that stuff going? It's going to the ground somewhere.
So, does anybody have any more questions? Yes?
Yeah, on the tours or the walking on the white banks and stuff, you've seen the trash that's been left there.
Oh, yeah.
And how do you get rid of that? And for the safety of the residents that live not far from there and the rest of it?
The rangers, I have 2 rangers right now. I had 3. We only have X amount of dollars, and I need the rangers more in the summer than I do in the fall. But a lot of times the rangers pick up trash a lot. Or if somebody dumps, we just had a tire dump, bad tire dump on up near White Banks Road. And so Taunton and New Bedford will also come and pick up big stuff like that. People don't want to pay to have their washing machine to go to Lakeville and trash it on the side of the road, and televisions and
Mattresses, don't forget the mattresses.
well, we did get one guy with bags of trash because he wasn't smart enough. His mail was in the bag, and we got it.
We had a woman who had called the selectman's office one day when I was working there, and she was so upset, and she had said, you can't believe how much trash is parked right near the Wampanoag Cemetery. Is that the one you were talking about with the tires? She said, it's huge, it's a huge amount of trash. And she said, and I've called whatever police departments and so on, and no. But she was amazed at how much. And then when our DPW person went out, they were stunned at how much trash. They just dropped it. It was almost like a truckload.
Yep.
Hard to believe on 105.
Yeah, contractors from other towns maybe just back up and push it off because they don't want to bring it to the landfill.
Tough to get rid of that wallboard.
So we all kind of take turns with that, like you say, our highway did that, New Bedford does it sometime. Because most of that land over on that side belongs to New Bedford, which nobody gives enough credit to New Bedford as far as I'm concerned for saving a lot of that land over the years around the drinking water. But none of it was protected until 2002 because when that deal went through where we got Betty's Neck, conservation restriction went on that whole 4,000 acres of land. So that's in perpetuity. That was the best part, that could never be sold because New Bedford had the foresight to buy it. But who knows, with administrations coming and going, somebody could have come in and said, oh, we can make a lot of money off of this land over in the back off of, not White Banks Road, what is that, Marion Road. So, and there is on the other side, I noticed all the time, the more housing developments that go around the perimeter of the APC is the more people. Every year there's more people that learn, oh, what a beautiful spot, let's go there. And then I never thought about it when I fought hard to protect it, and once state money went into it, it was open to the public, and little did I realize it's like, oh my, now the stewardship is on us. That's on the bottom of my paper from Betty's Neck. Now we're the stewards of this land, and now it's up to us. And I just you never even realize until I rode my bicycle between the lakes and I was horrified. You don't see from the car that even the cigarette butts that people just dump is, you don't see that from the car. I'm riding my bicycle, I'm like, and even the worm containers that are styrofoam that get left behind, or, people that don't take care of their, keep their dogs on a leash. We had somebody that worked for the town highway years ago, and he had his little 7-year-old son out there fishing, and the dog came flying along and knocked his little boy right in the water. It's April, and it was like a half a mile back to the car. It's cold. So it's, once you open the land to the public, that was a whole new opening of the eyes for me. But that's why I don't ranger as much anymore. That's why I have rangers. I just do the other stuff.
That's why they don't let you carry a gun.
Good point.
I just was thinking about the roads, and you were talking about it couldn't be tarred or anything like that. You wouldn't want that. But I was thinking down the Cape, and they use a lot of the crushed shells. And whether if you're doing something with New Bedford, and there's, certainly lots of fishing going on there, if we could if there was a way to maybe make some kind of arrangement, because that would be all natural
Right, it
And,
would be all natural, but I would run that, still have to run that by the conservation restriction, because that woman, when we had our meeting on Wednesday, the state person from Fisheries and Wildlife came down to go over. We're putting that grant in for Betty's Neck, so we needed to go over with her the conservation restriction to the letter to make sure everything that we're writing in the grant we can do.
Just a kind of a
Yeah,
thought
no,
of
it is a
using an
thought.
organic material that in the old days they used to always have,
Right.
driveways with shells, just old shells.
Yeah, the land the town owned up on Howland Road, up past the high school, the old pig farm, up in the
Okay.
back there. Well, we had purchased 600 acres up there that we sold to Fisheries and Wildlife after a fact, because we couldn't watch that 600 acres. But when we looked at the aerial of it, it glowed, and we were like, what is that? So when we actually got on the property and went and looked, it was all, they must have got shells from New Bedford or whatever, because all the interior roads were all with the shells, and on the overhead it probably would glow in the dark. It just showed up so bright.
Wow.
I have to ask how the Eagles are doing down your
We
area.
have one sitting pair on Enoxanon, which I do have the rangers keeping an eye on it, because people just think they have to get close, but the water's high, so you can't really get to Enoxanon. It's a small island on Quiticus, so for sure, one or the other of the eagles is sitting on that all the time. And I think I said before, I saw 2 matures together in Middleborough on the river, like the day before yesterday. And I don't like seeing 2 adults together at this time of year, because they should be getting busy laying their eggs and sitting on them. So I'm not sure about the nest on Parkshire. But there are 2 immatures hanging around, and they do practice nests, and we have had, Sampson's Cove has had a nest in the past, not for probably the last 4 years. But there, over the years, there have been 2 times they've nested in Sampson's Cove. The first time, the nest blew down. Everybody thinks, oh my God, they build these beautiful nests. Well, the first couple of years, they really don't do that great of a job. It gets better as the years go on, because they add to it. So that first year, the nest blew down in Sampson's Cove, but the parents raised that eaglet in a tree, just sitting there, and they continued to feed it. And as far as I know, it made it. And then the second time they had a nest in Sampson's Cove, the eggs fell out of the tree. Yeah. That was the time that I really wished. Dick Turner goes, you want to see it? I'm like, yeah. And then I said, ugh, no, I didn't want to see it, because the image will never go away, because it was developed in the egg, and it just didn't make it. So, actually, and I've said this how many times I should know, the mortality rate of a bald eagle is only 50% in the first couple of years, and as it's been in the paper lately, that eagle that was poisoned, well, we had that last year. We had the same eagle that we rushed to the clinic on the Cape, and it died overnight because it got into the rat poison, or got into a rat or mouse or whatever, ate the poison, and we didn't make the papers, but same thing. It was very sad. It was in it from the banding. It was an eagle that had been born here in 2017, so that was even worse. It was one of ours. So I think there's a movement going on to try to do something about the DDT. Not the DDT. That's old. Decon. Decon.
But we had that problem in 2015 also with sick eagles. And what happened there?
They all made it.
Yeah, but how did that come about?
I'm not sure. They got into some poison. But people do that, even for their mice. People put the poison out, and then they go out to get the water and die outside. But an eagle's not going to go after a mouse. It would most likely be a rat or some other kind of, maybe a squirrel. I don't know, people get squirrels in their house. I don't know what they put out for poison.
So I had heard that they're not banding the eagles like they used to because their numbers have increased. Is that
Their
true?
numbers have increased, but they're still, what they tell me is they're still banning some of the historic nests, which ours is.
So do they ever invite anybody to see the banding or no?
Yes, I do. I can have a guess. Well, I've taken some of our state reps' children. I've taken selectmen from Lakeville. I think I took our police chief
Nice.
one year. So Token resident. You gotta do something really big.
Eagle pictures on Lakeville helping.
Yeah, because it's a very limited amount that go out to bid, and we didn't go out last year at all. Well, with COVID and stuff, it's been hard. And then this year, I don't think that nest that usually is a historic nest that gets banded is on Hawkshire, and I'm not hearing anything too good, because the rangers check every day, and they're sure that they're setting on the island on Quiddicus, but not in the cove on Hawkshire. So we'll see. Maybe it's just a little late. Or eagles have a tendency, if they lose their first set of eggs 10 days later, they'll lay one single extra. So I don't know, but we haven't had. It's been windy, but we haven't had any like snow or anything like that or whatever. And Mother Nature. Anyway, so I'll be around. I can talk for a little while if anybody wants to talk or has any other questions. But I think that's good for me.
Thank you.